everyone, welcome to the 6th episode of Ukraine War Uncovered, podcast about the war in Ukraine.
Today is 462nd day of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. My name is Pavlo, my colleague is Anna. We are Ukrainians and co-hosts of this podcast. In this podcast we will uncover facts and stories about the war in Ukraine, some of which you may not hear from the mainstream media.
We will provide you with key weekly updates about the war based on information from the ground, connect with eyewitnesses and experts directly from Ukraine, and share stories of wartime life inside Ukraine and stories of temporarily displaced people. We will also uncover Ukraine, its culture, language, and history for you.
In this episode, we will cover one of the most severe aspects of the war, violence against children and women. Firstly, we will dive deep into the mass deportation and abduction of Ukrainian children. Then we will move to the sexual violence against women as a strategy and culture of the Russian army. We want to acknowledge that this week's topic has been particularly challenging to research and discuss. We feel it's crucial to provide a warning that the content you are about to hear may be disturbing and sensitive in nature. We approach this difficult subject with utmost care and respect for survivors and victims affected by these acts of violence by Russia. Moving on to the topic of the week. We want to start with the issues of Ukrainian children's massive deportations by Russians. According to the Ukrainian government, more than 16,000 children have been deported to Russia, more than 10,000 have been located, and 308 have been returned as of March 2023. Thousands of children have been found in the basement of war-torn cities like Mariupol and at orphanages in Russia-controlled territories of Donbass. They include those where parents were killed by Russian shelling, or as well as other institutions or with foster families known as the children of the state. Russian claims that these children don't have parents or guardians to look after them, or that they can be reached by. It was proved that officials have deported Ukrainian children to Russia or Russian-held territories without consent, lied to them that they weren't wanted by their parents, used them for propaganda, and given them Russian families and citizenship. Interviewed by The Observer in Kyiv, the government ombudswoman for abducted children, Daria Gerasimchuk, knows about abduction scenarios. According to her, they kill the parent for whatever reason and kidnap the child. In other cases, they just grab the child directly from the family, perhaps to punish the family. Others go through the Pilinin concentration camps, collected, indoctrinated, and prepared for so-called adoption of the kind that Commissioner Lvova Belova has herself boasted. The scheme of the children filtration camps has been covered in research by the Yale School of Public Health and Humanitarian Research Lab. The research identified 43 facilities, including 41 camps that held Ukrainian children during the first year after the full-scale invasion. These 43 locations are not representative of all camps and facilities that have held Ukrainian children. There are those for which sufficient open-source information is available. Camps and facilities span the country from Russia-occupied Crimea to Magadan Oblast in Far East Russia. Russian officials state children, including those without families and those purported to be orphans, to these facilities for various reasons. Yale research identified 4 main concerning trends associated with the camps: pro-Russian re-education of Ukrainian children, potential violation of consent, lack of communication, and suspended return of children from camps. The Ukrainian side are understandably secretive about the networks helping to locate children. Diplomatic sources suggest an ingenious involvement of some Western governments, agencies, rival Ukrainian and Russian branches of Orthodox Church, and evangelical missionaries and volunteers working astride the front line and Russia-Ukrainian border. So far, the International Committee of Red Cross hasn't appeared to be involved. The children Russia taken from Mariupol and other regions of Ukraine during the months of full-scale invasion aren't the first Russia has been accused of stealing from Ukraine. Because years ago, in 2014, after Russia annexed Crimean Peninsula, more than 80 children from Lugansk were stopped at checkpoints and abducted by Russian-backed forces. Ukraine sued at the European Court of Human Rights, and the court found children were taken into Russia without medical support and necessary paperwork. The children abducted in 2014 were returned to Ukraine before the final decision. We hope that all other children taken by Russia during the current full-scale invasion would also be safely returned home. Abduction of children is one of the charges against Russia in the International Criminal Court. In March 2023, the court pre-trial judges said that there were reasonable grounds to believe that each suspect bears responsibility for the war crime of unlawful deportation of population and that of unlawful transfer of population from occupied areas of Ukraine to the Russian Federation in prejudice of Ukrainian children. The judges said that they had chosen to unseal the names of suspects, Vladimir Putin and Lyubova Belova, the Russian Children's Commissioner, in effort to prevent further crimes by them. Lyubova Belova has herself described adopting a 15-year-old child from Mariupol, the southeastern Ukrainian city that was devastated by and occupied by Russian forces. According to Reuters, hundreds of Ukrainian children have been taken from orphanages and children's homes to Russia, ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan said in a statement. Many of those children, we allege, have since been given up for adoption in the Russian Federation, according to Mr. Khan. What does international law says? The United Nations Convention on Prevention of Genocide prohibits forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, and the UN Convention on Children's Rights bans the illicit transfer and non-return of children abroad. Importantly, neither Russia nor Ukraine are members of the ICC. Also, Kyiv granted jurisdiction to the prosecution of crimes committed on its territory. The tribunal has no police force of its own and relies on member states to make arrests. Putin is the third serving president to be targeted of ICC arrest award, after Omar al-Bashir and Libya Muammar Gaddafi. We hope that justice will find Putin and other Russian war criminals for abduction of Ukrainian children and other war crimes committed in Ukraine.
Now we will delve into an incredibly complex and sensitive topic: sexual violence against women and children by Russian soldiers. According to the United Nations, it has managed to verify more than 100 cases of rape and sexual assault in Ukraine since Russia invaded in February 2022. The actual numbers are much higher due to reasons we elaborate in a moment. The data obtained today suggests that the age of victims of sexual violence ranges from 4 to 83 years old. The victims are mostly women and girls, but also men and boys. It's been noted that it's very difficult to have reliable statistics during an active conflict, and the numbers will never reflect reality because sexual violence is a silent crime. As such, reported cases are only the tip of the iceberg. In April 2022, the Ukrainian ombudswoman Lyudmila Denisova was said to have received 400 reports of rape committed by Russian soldiers. The reports were mostly coming from the temporarily occupied territories or recently liberated areas. In June 2022, media reported on the first trial of a Russian charged with rape and sexual violence. The soldiers stood accused of raping a Ukrainian woman during Russia's invasion. Reportedly, the suspect, Mikhail Romanov, accused of breaking into a house in March in a village in the Brovary region outside Kyiv, murdering a man and then repeatedly raping his wife and her child. In October 2022, Pramila Patten, representative of the UN Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict, confirmed that rape is part of Russia's military strategy and a deliberate tactic to dehumanize the victims. She emphasized that when women are held for 4 days and raped, when you start to rape little boys and men, when you see a series of genital mutilations, when you hear women testify about Russian soldiers equipped with Viagra, it's clearly a military strategy. In November 2022, Reuters news agency reported that some Russian commanders have encouraged and ordered sexual violence. Dr. Ingrid Elliott, Ambience, one of the UK's preventing sexual violence in conflict experts, said that the Russians have two methods of sexual violence. The first of which is staged during an attack on a village. People are dragged out to the streets and paraded, men and women, Dr. Elliott says. There are circumstances where the men would be killed and the women would face sexual violence afterwards. Sometimes the women are rounded and held in basements, where repeated sexual violence is inflicted upon them for days or even weeks. The second pattern of abuse happens in detention centers in occupied territories. While it is hard to document this abuse, people who have fled or been liberated have come forward with information. What we see then is sexual torture against them, Dr. Elliott said. This can take the form of genital mutilation, castration, or sodomy. The account and reports presented here paints a devastating picture of the widespread sexual violence against women, men, and children by Russian forces in Ukraine since the invasion. These acts of violence not only inflict physical and psychological harm, but also aim to dehumanize and terrorize the victims, common pattern used by Russian army as part of their terror tactics. It is crucial that we continue to shed light on these actions, support the survivors, and work toward justice and accountability for the perpetrators. It's even hard to say this news.
Yep. And moving then to the updates from the front lines this week, May 26, the private military group called Wagner Group left Bakhmut and were substituted by regular Russian military. Secretary of National Security and Defense Councils of Ukraine, Alexei Danilov, said that it doesn't mean that they have given up. It just means that they will regroup and spread across the other areas of the front line. May 27, GUR, the main Ukrainian Directorate of Intelligence, reported that Russian military started a chemical weapon provocation around Zaporizhia. The purpose of it is to blame Ukrainians and use it as a reason to counterattack with chemical weapons too. May 30, Hanna Mailer, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian armed forces, informed that Ukrainian military controls the southwest suburbs of Bakhmut, whereas the advancement of the northern part of Bakhmut have been postponed temporarily. Thus, overall view of front lines remains similar to the last week, with the fightings happening heavily around Bakhmut.
Now we move to our weekly news updates. On May 25th, Ukraine returned home 106 prisoners of war that were captured in the Bakhmut area. Most of them were considered missing. The Parliament of the UK recognized Holodomor, masturbation of Ukrainians caused by Stalin in the 1930s, and the genocide of Ukrainians. On May 26th, that day, there was a massive missile attack on Dnipro. Particularly, they hit a civilian hospital with people remaining inside. 5 people died and 32 have been injured, including 2 children. On May 27th, two-time Grand Slam semi-finalist Ukrainian tennis player Elina Svitolina won her first WTA title in nearly 2 years and first since becoming a mother by beating Anna Bielkova Russian 6-2, 6-3 in the final and the International de Strasbourg on Saturday. Svitolina and her husband, tennis player Gael Monfils, became parents in October. Svitolina returned to the tour in April. Once ranked as high as number 3, Svitolina entered the tournament at number 508 and is the lowest-ranked woman to win a tour title since 2009. On May 28th, in the night, Russia attacked Ukraine with 59 drones. Ukrainian air defense forces shot down 58 out of them. It was the largest drone attack of the year. 40 drones were aimed at Kyiv, with drone cleverly killing 1 person, injuring several and damaging a few private households. On May 29th, Russians kept launching a high number of drones on Ukrainian territories. Ukrainian air defense forces destroyed 36 missiles, including 11 Iskander, once out 40 launched and 30 out of 38 Shahed drones over that night. A fragment of a Russian rocket almost hit a passenger minibus in Kyiv, which was captured on a camera. Kyiv citizens still use the tube stations as the most reliable shelter. Videos and photos of people hiding in tube were posted on internet. On May 30, the Ukrainian Air Force said it shot down 29 of 31 Indian-made head drones launched by Russia on Tuesday, as explosions reverberated and sent residents running for cover. Buzzing drones could be heard flying over central Kyiv before dawn, followed by wall-shaking explosions from air defense systems that knocked the unnamed vehicles out of the sky.
To briefly explain the overall situation regarding the missiles and air defense of Ukraine. The Russian assault on Tuesday, May 30th, was the 17th attack on the Ukrainian capital in May alone, after Ukraine forces shot down dozens of ballistic cruise missiles and drones over Kyiv in early hours of Sunday and into Monday. During May, Russia attacked not only at night hours but also during the day too. There was a video posted from Kyiv where you can see children rushing to the shelter during the day in school uniform after the air siren gun on. According to data collected by Forbes Ukraine, from February to October 2022, Russia fired about 1,200 long-range cruise missiles over Ukraine, according to Defense Minister of Alexei Reznikov and General Staff of Armed Forces of Ukraine. Of them, Ukrainian air defense and aviation were able to shoot down 246 cruise missiles, which is less than 30%. In the period from October 2022, the efficiency of Ukrainian air defense constantly increased, and in the last 2 months was about 90%. Thanks to advanced Western air defense system, Ukraine is now more protected. But it still does not stop Russia, as we see from the increasing number of Russian attacks this May.
Now we move to a week in the history of Ukraine. On May 29, 1964, the largest botanical garden of the USSR was opened in Kyiv. The Botanical Garden of Mykola Grishko. The garden covers 1.3 square kilometers or 120 hectares and contains 13,000 types of trees, shrubs, flowers, and other plants from all over the world. The Vedubuchi Monastery and Trinity Monastery of St. Jonas are located on the grounds of the botanical gardens. The territory of the garden is divided into floristic complexes such as Ukrainian Carpathians, Plain of Ukraine, Crimea, Caucasus, Central Asia, Altai, and Western Siberia, Far East. In every zone, plants typical from a particular region can be found. We kindly invite you to visit it if you have a chance or when the war is over.
Now moving on to the word of the week. This week's word is orcs. It is a word used by Ukrainians to describe Russian soldiers. The word is familiar to J.R.R. Tolkien readers as the name given to the monstrous anthropoids in the epic novel The Lord of the Rings. In all Tolkien's stories of the war in Middle-earth, orcs are violent, destructive, and untrustworthy, wreaking wanton havoc wherever they go. It is not hard to see why the people of Ukraine use this name for the invaders of our land. Interesting fact, in a new UA Animals charity social ad, Sala Baker, the actor playing the role of Sauron in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, addresses Ukrainians with words of support. The actors called to support UA animals and save animals from the war. And orcs of Middle-earth ask not to call Russians orcs, as a comparison with Russians offends their people's dignity.
On behalf of the orc diaspora of the world, I want to address you with an important request. Please, don't call Russians orcs. It offends us. For many centuries, we haven't used barbaric methods of warfare. Orcs wouldn't...
That's it for today. In the next episode, we will cover the diversity of Ukrainian army. We will talk about the life of LGBTQ+ people, the treatment of women, and adjustment made for the vegetarians. Stay tuned. Thank you for being with us, and see you next week.
Actually, hear you next week. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to heroes.